Welcome IGNU learners to the teleconferencing for the course DECE, Diploma in Early Childhood Care and Education. And yesterday we started with the first course. The course is Organizing Childcare Services. And today we'll pick up the next two units. Yesterday we started with the block 1, that is Introduction to Care and Development of Children. We discussed the first 3 units, the experiences of childhood, the basics concepts of child development, and the principles of development. Today we'll move to the next unit, Unit 4, and the unit is titled Needs and Rights of Children. From the time human beings have been there on this planet, family life has always been there. And as seen, children always required some or the other form of care and physical care. So, especially newborns and children at all age groups. So, specifically when we are discussing this unit, Needs and Rights of Children, we look into some objectives of the units. The objectives are, the unit is going to discuss the children's need for physical care, stimulation, love and nurturance. We'll also discuss about the needs of children with special needs. We'll discuss the rights of the child and what is the country doing to meet the needs of children. And we'll also discuss some components of childcare services. Let's begin with the first title, that's the need for physical care. As the infant is born, the infant has some capacities. The infant can see, hear, smell, taste. These are some of the abilities of the infant that helps the infant to feel the mother, to suck milk from the mother's breast, and to be able to understand a little about the surroundings. And yet, the infant needs constant physical care. This ensures the survival of the child, especially when it comes to good health. The child has to be kept away from infections. The child should not catch any diseases. Also, in terms of nutrition, the food, the child needs to be fed, the child needs to be, his clothes needs to be changed, and other needs have to be met. So, optimal development of the child requires physical care. And in physical care, the child needs to be healthy, the child needs to be provided nutrition, and as the child grows, the need for education. The age and the setting may change. Once the child is 1 to 2 years old, 3 years old, the child can roam around the house, can go out. But if the child is going to the market with the mother still needs to look after where the child is. The child may have to hold the mother's hand for safety and security. So as the age changes, as the setting changes, the physical needs change, but the child requires continuous physical care. The next need that we'll be discussing is the need for stimulation. Before we go on and understand this, we need to understand the term stimulation. What do you mean by stimulation? Stimulation is any event that causes the child to think and respond. Even for adults, stimulation is anything that stimulates you to think, respond. So for a child, anything in the surrounding. So if it's a toy and the child picks up a toy, puts it in the mouth, an infant, a 6-month baby, that's stimulation for the child. The father's smile, or a book that the child picks up, or a stone that the child picks up, a toy that the child is playing with. If a child touches a hot object, the child feels it's hot and removes the hand. That is also stimulation. So basically, if we see all the complete environment around the child is stimulation for the child, and yet the child selects what the child wants to do. So whatever the child is curious or interested in, the child picks up that object or talks to that person, and that becomes the stimulation. Again, what the child finds stimulating changes with age. So let's take the example of a flower. A 3-month-old baby picks up a flower. The first thing the child probably is going to do is put the flower in the mouth and then probably put it out. For a 3-year-old child, if the child has just learned about the color red and the flower is red, the child may just say, Lal, you're red. So the child may talk about the color of the flower. The same flower for a 5-year-old, the child would probably be more interested in knowing how the flower grows or wants to look at the pot or the plant. And when it comes to somebody like a 8-year-old child, the child with the same flower would probably want to know more about flowers, different kinds of flowers, different variety of flowers, those kinds of things. So what a child finds stimulating will change with age. The need for stimulation leads to exploration, and this leads to development. As thinking becomes more complex, whatever the child needs to learn and which helps him in development, the activities have to be created as per the child's age. So in case, say, for a 1-year-old child, a 1-year-old child is shown a balloon, and the child just points at the balloon and is not able to say the word. The mother will say something like, "Gubara chahiye? Kya chahiye?" So gubara, balloon, whatever the mother uses that word, the child hears it. And similarly, a lot of words the child is hearing every day and is able to link up the words to the objects. All the daily interactions with the adults, the way the mother speaks, the way the grandmother, the sibling comes to the child, smiles, picks up the child, all those social interactions, all this that's in and around the environment is stimulation for the child and helps develop the child various areas of development. The next need that we'll discuss is need for love and nurturance. Love and nurturance, the terms seem very simple, and yet if we think, a lot of time our care for children in many times is basically more based on the physical care. We love the children, we nurture them, but most of the time, sometimes, especially when it comes to institutions, institutional care, and children who are under a caregiver. Parents love their children, adults also love children, but when it comes to programs where people work with children, what happens sometimes physical care, safety becomes more important, and this need for love and nurturance takes a backseat. We'll discuss that. And yet, it is very important to understand that love and nurturance are very important needs for a child. They are very important needs of human beings, but for children, they are very, very central to their development. All the developments that we discussed yesterday, physical, language, cognitive, all will happen when there's an environment of love and nurturance. So when we talk about love, we talk about adults who love children or a caregiver. The term caregiver here, whenever we use the term caregiver in this course, we mean anybody who's looking after the child, after the needs of the child. It could be a parent, it could be a teacher, it could be a creche worker, an Anganwadi worker. So who is a loving caregiver? What do we call a loving caregiver? So somebody who responds to the needs of the child. The child is crying. Is the caregiver quick to react and respond to what does the child need? Is the child wet? Does the child need a bottle? Or some other child, a little bigger child? What is it that the child needs? That's important. So concern and a quick reaction or action of what the child needs is required. Promptness, concern for the child. And also to be able to anticipate a need. Do we wait till the child cries and then we give him whatever he needs, or do we anticipate that it is time for the child to be fed, or change of clothes is required, or some other kind of stimulation is required for the child? So anticipating needs and reducing distress is very important a factor when we talk about a loving caregiver. Who is a loving caregiver? Then what is this act of nurturance? How do we nurture? The things that families do, parents do, adults do. Talking to the child, playing with the child, singing to the child, listening to what the child has. The child comes to you with a question. What do? Do you say, "Don't come to me, I am busy, I am tired," or do you listen to the child? Even if you don't have the answer, probably you don't have the time. But what do you say? How do you answer? Do you appreciate the child when the child has done some little task? Do you explain things to the child? All those are acts of nurturance. Love and nurturance, as we discussed, is basically the foundation for especially all developments, but especially social and emotional development. Because when it comes to love, it's about relationships. It's about other adults, whether it's a parent, it's an aunt, it's the nursery school teacher. And all these, when I see people who care for me, who love me, what do I think of myself? I feel I am important. One, I get attached. I build these positive bonds with others. And when people around me I can trust, the same thing I carry on when I move out of my house to a classroom, to a school, later on at job, workplaces. I start trusting people. I build positive bonds. So that's important, this love and nurturance in the initial years. Also, it builds up my self-esteem. I'm important. It gives me that confidence. I'm good, I'm important, people like me. So this helps in the long run, especially in terms of exploratory behavior. When children explore their environment, only children who are confident of themselves, they can do a task, will go out, move around, pick up something, explore it and learn. If you see children who are insecure, if you see them, they'll basically be clinging to somebody, a parent or an adult. They would not like to explore the spaces around them. Then it also, the developmental changes in the needs of children. Children with special needs. That's another thing we'll discuss. So there are children who have some kind of a disability. There may be a child who is not able to hear, there may be a child who cannot see clearly, or has some other kind of emotional problems. So these kinds of children have needs, all these needs that we discussed, need for physical care, need for stimulation, need for love and nurturance. These are the basic needs of all children. In addition to these, children with special needs will have special needs. So a child who cannot hear, if the teacher is writing on the blackboard with the back turned, the child will not be able to see the lips of the teacher. So maybe the child has to be moved forward. Maybe the child requires a hearing aid. The teacher needs to go slowly. Her lips, the child should be able to read the lips. Those are the requirements. So educationally, in activities, in group settings, the child has needs that need to be looked after. And also the needs being looked after and how the child is treated. Is the child is different, the child knows that. But what do we do? The group, the other children, their parents, how do we treat the child? Do we accept the child as part of the group? That will help. Treating the child with affection as we treat all children. Not making the child feel inferior. So these children have needs that need to be looked into. Basically, okay, so we've discussed the needs for children, and yet we will see that a lot of children in our country, in other countries, the needs are not being fulfilled. If we see there are a lot of children who die young, there are a lot of children who die even before their first birthday. Under 5 death rate is there. There are children who are high-risk children, vulnerable children, children living on the streets, children whose parents have died or the parents have abandoned the children, single-parent children who don't have work, so don't have money. There are a lot of children who are in the orphanages. There are children who are working in conditions which are not conducive to their development, low wages, dangerous kind of work with chemicals, long hours. All these children, the needs of the children have been neglected in many parts of the world. And so the United Nations has this Declaration for the Rights of the Child. 1959, this document was brought out, which talks about the rights of the child. Every child has a right to a happy childhood. And also children are the future citizens. And it's the responsibility of the governments, the state, to look after the children's needs. So then this document talks about 10 rights. Let's discuss these. The first right is right to equality. So children have a right to equality. There should be no discrimination between children on any aspects, right? And the second, let's see, is the right to special protection. So children have to be given special protection. They have to be given opportunities for development. A child has a right to a name and a nationality. There's no child who will not belong to any nation. So every child has to have a name and a nationality and an identity. The next is right to health, adequate nutrition, housing and medical facilities. So these, when we discuss this, basically we're looking at the mother and the child, and we are also looking at both the prenatal, when the 9 months of the pregnancy, and postnatal after the birth of the child. So all the facilities that the government provides in terms of antenatal care, birth, delivery care, medication, interventions, vaccination, good quality food, supplementary feeding, midday meals, all these then become part of the programs because the child has a right to have health and nutrition. The next is right to special care for children with special needs that we just discussed. Children with specific needs, whether they need medical intervention, physiotherapy, some other kind of training programs, special educators, remedial classes, all those need to be provided. A child has right to those. Then the right of the child to love and understanding. So basically this right, actually all the children who are staying with their parents, most of them do get cared by the parents. There's a general atmosphere of affection in families, and yet there are children who don't have a family. So for those children, we need to create spaces or conditions whereby they are looked after, loved and cared for. Then the right to education. Children, once they grow, they'll be useful members of the society, and so they have a right to education for their overall development also. And this right also talks about the right to play and right to recreation. Next is the right to be the first to receive protection and relief in times of danger and calamity. So in case of an earthquake, floods, some other calamity, children are the first one who have to be protective. So moved away from that place, taken to a safe place. Right to be protected from all forms of neglect, cruelty and exploitation. This right specially talks about children who working, underage children who are working in conditions which are not conducive to their health. So all that needs to be stopped. The child has to be protected from that. Then the next is a right to be protected from practices which may foster racial, religious or other forms of discrimination. So sometimes there are these, basically the child has to be brought up in an environment of peace, harmony, understanding. So there are not too many prejudices around things like religion, race or any kind of discrimination. It's based on color, nationality, those kinds of things. And measures have to be taken by the countries. And if we look at the Indian Constitution, even before the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of the Child document was brought out, Indian Constitution had built guidelines in its constitutions. These are not laws, they are just guidelines. And our country focuses on some, let's discuss some of them, the directive principles of Indian Constitution related to children, related to the rights of the child. The first one is no child below the age of 14 years shall be employed to work in any factory, any mine or be engaged in any occupation that is hazardous. We've already discussed this yesterday and today also. And then next is to be protected against exploitation, abuse and abandonment. So we have to make sure that children are not forced into any kind of activity for economic gains by anybody. The next is to provide free and compulsory education to all children till they complete the age of 14 years. This has been a directive principle of our Indian Constitution. Despite all these efforts that have been put in the guidelines that have been put, still there was this need. Many of the needs of children were not met in the country. And then in 1974, the government adopted the National Policy for Children, whereby the policy says children are the supreme asset of any nation and their needs need to be met. And so all the programs, all the services that the government, non-government organizations offers, discusses all those. Childcare services. What is the need of childcare services? It has been seen that various groups of children need services. So whether these are services for the girl child or services for children who are from poor backgrounds or there's deprivation, they don't have enough of the basic needs, the family is not able to provide for the needs of children, those are one group of children that need care. In addition to that, now with more women working, we see there are children who require some kind of care. So there are 3-4 kinds of options. The parents initially we had joint families, now we have a lot of nuclear families, and so there's sometimes no adult in the house to look after the child. In those conditions, generally people hire a maid to look after the child, that's one option, or otherwise they'll put the child in a creche, or they'll a older sibling may look after the child. All these options have their own pros and cons. So especially when it comes to other children in families where some child is looking after a younger child, that child is not able to go to school. So that child's education gets hampered. So then we are looking, the government has to look at and there are a lot of childcare services that are available. And let's look at some of the services, components of childcare services. What should be part of these childcare services? If we look at it, there are three things that we can talk about. We can talk about the health. So all these childcare services require the health component. Children have to have regular checkups. Immunized, children should be immunized, and in case of any sickness, any disease, they need to be referred to the primary healthcare center or the hospital nearby. In fact, first aid facilities also should be there, should be organized in the childcare services. The second point is nutrition. The nutritional needs of the children need to be met, especially the children whose homes are not able to provide the dietary requirements. Midday meal, a snack, some supplementary feeding needs to be done at the center, whether it's a creche, it's a preschool, or it's an Anganwadi. And then the next is education. So in case of children under 6 years of age, preschool education needs to be provided. Preschool education is basically stimulating experiences that need to be provided, experiences through play that help the child in learning and exploration. So basically, this is what we had to discuss. Let's summarize this as this topic, the needs and rights of the children. Here today we have discussed the need for children. The needs of children are the need for physical care, the need for stimulation, the need for love and nurturance, and we did talk about special needs of children who have a disability. Then we talked about the rights of the child. We talked about the UN Declaration of the Rights of the Child, whereby we talked about 10 rights for children that are put up there, and many governments are signatory of this document. And then they try to make sure that whatever their programs are in the country, that help them to abide by the rights that are mentioned. Indian government, we have the Indian Constitution and the directive principles, which also look into the needs, the rights of the children, which talk about protecting the child against abuse, exploitation. The children should not be employed in any kinds of vocations that are unsuitable for their age, to be able to provide them free and compulsory education. And in 1974, the National Policy for Children is also there. It's a document that talks about how children are important assets of a nation and we need to look after their needs. Then we discussed the childcare services. What are childcare services? What is the need for having childcare services in the country? And what are some of the components of the childcare services? So childcare services components, basically we discussed three. We discussed about the health aspect that needs to be looked after for these children, their nutritional needs that need to be looked after, and the education. And in this case, since we are talking about children under 6 years of age, so we're talking about preschool education, stimulation activities in the preschool or the Anganwadi that help the child for the overall development of the child.